Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and today I will be talking about Deadpool and Wolverine. Before we begin, I would like to mention two things. One, there are major spoilers in this review, and two, this isn't exactly a review, but they are my thoughts on the overall movie itself. The action in this movie is really well done. I would personally say that the action is the best in the entire series. The first two fight scenes were really well done. The first fight scene is with Deadpool against the TVA, and Deadpool is using Wolverine's skeleton to fight them. I honestly think this is a really creative way to have a fight scene occur, just because of Wolverine's skeleton being made of adamantium, which makes it so much easier for him to kill his enemies, and I just find it very unique. The next fight scene that I really liked was the scene where Deadpool and Wolverine fight for the first time. It was really cool because there were some slow motion shots and we truly see how Wolverine can fight against a foe. A little detail that I liked about this scene was the fact that Wolverine went on all fours and he ran at Deadpool like a wild animal, and I thought that was so cool. The reason why I found this so cool is because they actually show that animalistic traits to Wolverine's power, and I feel like we never got enough of that in the Wolverine movies, and to finally see it in live action is just so cool to see. The other thing I liked was, of course, all of the cameos. Now, there weren't as many cameos as I thought they were going to be, but that doesn't take away from the type of cameos that we actually got. Now, we got small cameos from like Toad, Lady Deathstrike, Pyro, the Juggernaut, but there were really big cameos that I absolutely love. We got cameos from Johnny Storm, Gambit, Blade, Elektra, as well as X-23. We even get a tiny cameo for about 5 seconds with the Hulk. It's just so cool seeing all these cameos, and I can't believe how they managed to fit all of this into a 2-hour movie. One of the better cameos that I thought was pretty good was Henry Cavill as a variant of Wolverine. Now, I think I've heard a few people say that they wanted Henry Cavill as Wolverine, and I'm not sure how I felt about it, but after seeing his very small cameo in this movie, I think I would be all for a version of Wolverine being played by Henry Cavill. I also like how they handled the cameos in this movie. Back when Avengers Endgame came out, it was all about the spectacle of the cameos. Like, they would have a dire situation happen, then the music would go up and get more tense, and then suddenly out of nowhere a character you would never expect showing up shows up and saves the day. Back then it was really cool to see, but now in almost every single Marvel project where they have a cool cameo, it gets a bit irritating after a while, and it almost feels like they're forcing us into liking the movie, even though the movie was absolute crap. In Deadpool 3, they have the cameos, yes, but they don't have a big build-up to the cameos. The cameos just show up, and they do their little thing, and then they get murdered horrifically. This is how every single Marvel project, or even DC project, should handle cameos. Obviously not killing them horrifically, but don't make a big spectacle out of it. Make it feel like it matters to the story, and not just be there to be there. And Deadpool 3 does this perfectly. One major thing I loved about this movie was finally seeing Wolverine again. This was the major draw of this film, seeing Deadpool and Wolverine together. I've got to say that seeing Wolverine in his classic outfit was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And they even had his freaking cowl. I can't tell you how amazing it was to see this thing in live action, because oh my god, it was a sight to behold, and I really wish that they went with this idea earlier, because it looks so good. The last really good thing about this movie was the CGI. Marvel has been known to overwork their CGI artists, and that's why a lot of recent Marvel projects have looked so bad in the CGI department. But the good news here is that in Deadpool and Wolverine, the CGI is fantastic. It really does seem like the production team of Deadpool and Wolverine really did care about the workers and what they were putting out. And Marvel needs to have this type of care with every project they release. I'm just very happy to finally see some care put into a movie and not just put out just to make more money for Disney. Some of the issues I have in this movie are honestly just personal and has no effect on the story at all, but I still wanted to mention them, as for me it was personally disappointing, but doesn't affect the overall movie itself. So the first negative I have is honestly the story. Like, the story isn't bad in any way, it's just in the background in my opinion, and most of the movie is just there to be funny, or just be playing fan service. The fan service isn't an issue at all, not at all. I loved it, but I feel like they could have put more time into the actual storytelling. We didn't really get anything out of the main villain of this movie, because I don't think they could really give us a solid answer on who the main villain was. We had a guy in the TVA who was trying to destroy all timelines, so there could only be one. And then we had Professor X's evil sister. I can get that we should have villains sometimes that are just evil to be evil, and that's what they did in Guardians 3. But in this movie, it didn't even seem like the villain was evil. They just had her there to be an obstacle, and I'm quite disappointed in that, because apparently she can be quite evil when she wants to be, but they just did not show that in this movie. I also have an issue with the way they portrayed Wolverine's story. Now, to be clear, this is not the same Wolverine that we have come to know and love from like X-Men Origins and the older X-Men movies and whatnot. This is a totally different version of Wolverine. This version of Wolverine was an outcast in his own timeline because he left the X-Men at the worst possible time, and there was basically a mutant genocide, and Wolverine wasn't there to help protect the mutants. This meant that all of the X-Men perished, as well as most of the mutant kind, and Wolverine was not there to help. It is then said that Wolverine went on a murdering rampage, killing good guys and bad guys alike, and this made him an outcast in their world, because he was just so brutal. In my opinion, they didn't go far enough into this story, and honestly, I'm not a big fan of this either. What I originally theorized they were going to go for was the storyline where Wolverine was brainwashed by Mr. Sinister, and then went on a murdering rampage, killing all mutants in existence. I'd much rather that storyline, rather than what they went for in this movie. Now, I know that's reusing a storyline from the comics, but it still would have made more sense than what they put in this movie. Now I'll talk about the parts that are more disappointing and won't affect my overall thoughts on the movie. I feel like there were a lot of missed opportunities with this movie, including some of the cameos that we should have and could have gotten. I feel like they should have put more of the budget into getting some of the X-Men characters into the movie. We did get some X-Men characters, but they were more background characters in my opinion in the older X-Men movies. For crying out loud, we got the Juggernaut and Toad. I'm not saying that's a bad thing that we got them, but it just felt like wasted potential, because those characters weren't as known or loved as, let's say, somebody like Magneto. I just wish that they didn't get rid of the cameos, but replace the cameos with more well-known people like Magneto, a variant of Rogue, or Professor X. Hell, even Quicksilver or Storm. But we didn't get any of those characters, which is quite disappointing in my opinion. I was also disappointed with the fact that we didn't get a scene with Wolverine and the Hulk fighting. Trust me, going into this movie, I fully expected to see this happen. But no, they tease us with it happening, but they never actually get into it. We see a version of Wolverine in the woods, and then we see him with his claws out, and on the reflection of the claws, we can see the Hulk. Then they just end the scene right there. I was personally very annoyed with that, because the people behind the scenes obviously know what the fans want, and the fans wanted to see the Hulk versus Wolverine, and they tease us with that, but they never give it to us. And that stuff to me is quite annoying, because if they knew what the fans wanted to see, why didn't they put more of the budget into a fight like that? I know I'm basically wanting fan service, but as a fan, I just would have loved to see this stuff. But again, it doesn't affect the overall movie. It's just disappointing that we didn't get to see this stuff. One other minor negative that I have is the fact that the main cast from the past two movies are barely in this movie. And in fact, they're only in this movie for like 5 minutes in total. It's quite disappointing how they built up the Deadpool group and then throw them to the side in the third movie. I don't know how they could have possibly played a role in this movie, but it's quite disappointing because those group of characters are so well done together that it would have made this movie a lot more like the end of a trilogy rather than just another Deadpool movie. Overall, this was a good Deadpool movie, and I feel like it is the best of the trilogy, but not by much. I mostly enjoyed this movie because of the cameos, the comedy, as well as the action. But otherwise, the story is unfortunately quite lacking, and I really would have liked to see them put more thought into the story itself. Otherwise, everything else was fantastic, and I highly suggest that you go out and see this in theaters. Thank you all so much for watching, and see you in the next video.